to the lower class and even below, with the numbers 50 million to be on food stamp, not to mention the unemployed people who, well, for the ages of 18 to 25, is set to be 20 to 25%, if not higher. How do you see then the future for the U.S., where there's going to be a breaking point?
Well, I think that the future is certainly bleak, and let's take each one of those different sectors in the economy. For one, we have young people graduating from universities unable to find jobs, and the only thing that they can find is a letter in their mailbox telling them how many tens of thousands of dollars they owe, the massive debt that they really have little chance of ever repaying. So you can imagine what sorts of economic problems that generation faces with nothing but debt to show for their years in universities. Now, if we look at homeowners, for example, we don't really see any solutions coming out of Washington from either the Republicans or Democrats with regard to those people who are upside down on their homes, who are losing their homes to foreclosure. We don't see a moratorium on foreclosures or anything even approaching that. In fact, we see quite the opposite. We see continued giveaways to those banks and financial institutions which are essentially predatorily attacking these homeowners. If we take the elderly, we see people losing their access to senior centers. We see Medicare being gouged. We see an attack on all these various social services and social programs. So it should be self-evident, as I mentioned, how this erodes the social fabric. And then we should remember also that this is something that can take 10, 15, 20 years to rear its ugly head. And what kind of an impact will this have on society in, let's say, 2033, when we have an entirely new generation getting ready to retire, one that has never been able to enjoy the fruits of many of these social programs. And let's also point out that the Republicans are, of course, disingenuous when they claim that they have any interest in the middle class. Their interest is in eroding the social safety net that has been in place now for 70-plus years. And there are many people on Wall Street, in Washington, and around the world who applaud this mentality. And this is, of course, deplorable. There are many countries, as Max Keiser pointed out, there are many countries that are following this exact same model, and they're not simply the G7, and they're not simply in Europe. We can see a very similar economic model being laid out in South Africa. We can see it all in many other parts of the world. So the attack on the social safety net will result in the destruction of the social fabric, and that will have far-reaching implications well beyond the balance sheets and those on Wall Street.
And one of the most alarming stats, Max Keiser, when we look at all the different ones, is well, before the fiscal cliff, it was said that every U.S. household owes, about $140,000 to the national debt, and that's rising. Explain that for us, and how this is going to, some say, by some accounts, that it's going to be passed on to the next generation, these debts that each household owes.
Well, the way America and these other countries can ring up debts that are hundreds of percentage points greater than their gross domestic product is by keeping interest rates near 0%. The central banks, like the Federal Reserve or the ECB or the Bank of Japan or Bank of England, have all coordinated their activities. They collude, which is anti-competitive, to keep interest rates near 0%, and at the same time they have off-balance sheet accounts, what they call the shadow banking system, which is now around the world, if you count it all up, worth $69 trillion. So it's, the value is greater than the entire world's GDP. And this debt is orbiting, if you will, the planet and waiting to fall in a most spectacular wave of hyperinflation the second that interest rates start to go up. And what will start the interest rates going up is when one country, it could be China, it could be Japan, says they're not going to play this game of financial chicken anymore, and they're going to default on their bonds. That means interest rates go higher, which will set off a chain reaction of global fiat currency collapse. And this is what people in America know very, very well. That's why the very rich in America are buying assets like fine art, like gold and silver, like diamonds, precious metals, because they know that ultimately the hyperinflation is coming, the currency collapse is coming because of the catastrophe that they engineered, and they will be ruling the world, so to speak. And we're going to go back to really an economic system that you'd have to go back to feudalism to find something similar. The incredible